this is what we're going to look at today. I'm going to do a short introduction to self-study. Then we're going to look at the self-study program for the IELTS speaking test, look at some tips for improving speaking, do a summary, and hopefully have time for Q&A at the end. I will be asking you to do some exercises, so it would be helpful to have next to you a piece of paper and a pencil so you can just write down answers as we go through. So we're going to start by thinking about what's involved in studying independently. So there's obviously one of the things that we need to think about is a comfortable study environment. So could you please think for a minute, what else is involved? If we're trying to study by ourselves, what do we need to think about? Please put your ideas in the chat box. Sofrin saying motivation, yep. Sarah saying time. Karen saying a timetable. Mohammed, a study plan, yes. Mohammed, a good one, clear vision. Yes, goals, okay, so yes, I mean, one thing is you need somewhere where you can sit and study comfortably. And as you mentioned, motivation, and it's more difficult when you're working on your own. So you've got to have sort of strategies and tips to keep yourself motivated, like rewarding yourself, etc. Then the whole issue of targets, yes, and they do need to be realistic. And you need to congratulate yourself on whatever you achieve to do. Whatever you achieve to do. I'm sorry, it's 34 degrees in Paris this afternoon and I seem to be almost unable to speak, but I shall try to do better as we go along. So you need to look for support from people around you, let them know what you're doing. It's often useful to have a specific time to study each day or each week. The study plan is very helpful. It gives a structure to what you're doing and allows you to set short-term and long-term goals. You do need to be independent. Of course, you're going to need access to the internet and books and other materials. And do remember that you need to reward yourself because that will help you to keep going and maintain your motivation. So we've thought a little bit about what's involved in studying independently. And now I'm going to ask you, if you've been in the previous webinars, you know we talked about 6 different areas. And I'm going to put up some pictures, which some of you will have seen before. And looking at that first picture, what does it relate to? There are 6 key areas. Yes, and I don't know how to pronounce your name. I think it's Levgan. Yes, it's a place to study. Lovely and well done, everybody. So let's do the same. I'm going to put up a picture and ask you to put in the chat box which of those 6 elements it refers to. Yes, Huda, your goals, your targets, your target setting, which is part of organizing yourself to study independently. And another one for you. Timing, somebody's saying, yep, timing, time management. There are 2 aspects, timing and breaks, yep, something to think about. There are 2 aspects to time. There's the scheduling, as Neela's saying, but there's also thinking about the duration. How long are you going to study for? And how long, as Ahmad's saying, effective time, how long can you study effectively for? So, you know, do think about both a time when you can study and how long you can take. And this one, what's this referring to? One of those 6 elements. Anastasia, yes, support. If you're working on your own, it's very helpful if you can let somebody else know what you're doing and get some support for what you're doing from those around you. The support, as Tagrid's saying, could be the family, could be a friend, could be someone you know online. And the 6th area, there it is, that lovely coffee. That's Layla's coffee there. Yes. So as Neela's saying, rewarding yourself, giving yourself a treat. And that's the treat that's Layla's treat there, that wonderful coffee. So we've talked about what's involved in self-study, and we've talked about those 6 areas. And now we're going to think about what is a good study tip. And I'm asking you to do the work here. I'm asking you to think about a tip that you think would help somebody else to study independently successfully. So my tip is there. So my tip is setting both short-term and long-term study targets for yourself can help you stay motivated, because it means that you achieve something every day. So can I ask you to put into the chat what you think is a useful self-study tip for anybody? Sonali's saying take breaks in between. And Anusha's saying to read as much as you can, whenever, wherever possible. Very nice. Opayemi saying know your study time when you are active. Good idea there from Camillo. Watch films in English. Ishan saying be consistent. People talking about realistic goals. Yep. Study when you're concentrated. So yes, lovely tips. Thank you for that. I'm sorry I couldn't read them all out, but there's some lovely tips coming through. I'm going to share with you a few more of mine. I think it's important to try to have not only a comfortable place to study, if that's possible in your home, but also think about having it as a well-lit place so that you protect your eyes. I think having a regular time to study can be helpful, because then it becomes part of your weekly or daily routine. Some of you made this point. Don't try to do too much in one go. Study for an hour or so and then give yourself a break. Get up, stretch, move around, because then that's good for your brain and you'll find it easier to study again after the break. And this thing about getting support from the people around you. Let them know what you're doing, ask them to check in with you, have somebody that you can talk to about what you've achieved, even if it's a very short-term goal and you, for example, just watched a film in English. If they check in with you and say, so what have you done with your English this week? You say, well, I watched a film. It helps you. And I think Manjit's there making a good point. Make sure you get enough sleep. So we're going to move on now and talk about the actual speaking self-study program. If you haven't downloaded it, Layla did put it in the chat, or she put the link in the chat where you can download it, and do download it soon before you forget. So the main aims of that program are that you will understand the format of the speaking test. You'll understand how your performance in the speaking test is going to be assessed. You'll understand the type of topics you'll be asked about and how you should respond in each part of the test. And the program will also help you develop appropriate vocabulary for the IELTS speaking test. So our self-study program is divided into days, and I'm going to talk about it to you today as days, but obviously it's not something that you have to do everything over 5 days, and that probably would be a bit too much. So what you can do is take what's in the program and then use that to make your own study plan. So in day 1, you're going to find out a lot about the test. You're going to have a chance to practice speaking part 1, and you're going to understand how the test is marked and watch a video of somebody doing IELTS speaking part 1. And the more you can become familiar with the IELTS test and all 4 papers, not just speaking, I think the more relaxed you'll feel when you go to take your test. So let's see what you already know about the IELTS speaking test format. So have a look at these instructions. So this is going to be a little gap fill exercise, and you can use no more than 4 words and or numbers for each answer. So Sentence number 1, the speaking test lasts blank minutes. The speaking test lasts minutes, not hours or days, luckily, but what could you put in that gap? I'm waiting. So this is the speaking test. People are saying 15 minutes, not quite. 30 minutes, no, it doesn't last that long. Okay, well, we'll look at the answers in a minute. Syed, 11 to 14 minutes. Very good. All right, look at number 2. The speaking test assesses your spoken English. Yes, it does. But which words could fit in that gap? Oh, could be. Yes, okay, well, we'll see the answers in a minute. Moving on to number 3, the test is with a qualified examiner. Yes, but what's the format of the test? How many examiners are there? How many test takers are in the room? Can you think of something that would fit in that gap and would fit grammatically with it? So it has to fit with the sentence. Face to face, good one. Yes, that would fit. Okay, we'll look again in a minute. You will get the answers, but let's just do the questions. So the IELTS speaking test is recorded, but how is it recorded? Can you think of a word or words or numbers that would fit in that gap, into that gap? Video or audio recorded, good, yes, that would fit. Mahmoud almost got the answer. You'll see it in a minute. And finally, the test is in parts. How many parts? Whoa. Moving on. Other things, so this is the sort of thing that you will be learning in day 1 of the self-study speaking program. And it will take you to this site, which is the IELTS.org site, which you can find out lots and lots of detail about the speaking test and the other parts of IELTS. For example, you can also get useful information about the focus of each task. So it helps you to understand what the test is about, what it's testing, what the examiner's looking for, and so on. So let's see a little bit more about what happens in IELTS Speaking Part 1. And again, I've got a little exercise for you. Again, it's a little gap fill, but this time the gaps will only take no more than 2 words. So in Part 1, the examiner will ask you general questions about who or what are they going to be asking you about. And Salomia's in there already. Opayemi, yes, very good. We'll see the answers in a minute. So, number 2, the examiner will ask you, now, if you look at number 1, there's a big hint there for you. So what will the examiner ask you? They're going to ask you this about a range of familiar topics. Well done, Anusha. We're talking about, they will ask you general questions. And number 3, which doesn't have a number. So this part of the IELTS speaking test, part 1, how long does it last? And can you think of 2 words that would fit in that gap? So it's only part 1. This part 1 lasts 4 and 5 minutes, doesn't work. Could last. Okay, good. Let's have a look at the answers. So into those gaps, the questions you're asked about are about yourself. They are general questions on familiar topics, and this part 1 of IELTS lasts between 4 and 5 minutes. Well done. So now we're going to think in a little bit more detail about this. So in speaking part 1, the examiner, we've been told, will ask us questions about a range of familiar topics, including home, work, studies, and interests. So I'd like you to think for a minute, which other topics, we've got 4 topics there, which other topics could come up And which topics would not come up in IELTS Speaking Part 1? So first of all, Manjeet, well done. Were you here this morning? Anyway, so I'm going to put up a poll question now. So this is poll question 4, please. And when you see the poll question, look at the list of topics and choose the topics which you would not be asked about in IELTS Speaking Part 1. So the topics that are on the list, if you can't see the poll questions, are books, cooking, current affair dynamics. So just, if you can see the poll question, do answer there. And if we could see the results, please. Okay, so the question was, which of these topics would you not be asked about? Some interesting responses. A lot of you, though, good, are understanding that metaphysics isn't going to be an IELTS Speaking Part 1 topic. So I'm just going to show you the answers now. So the topics that would not come up in IELTS Speaking Part 1 from that list, they won't ask you about current affairs because they don't make the IELTS speaking test the day before you take it. It's a process and it takes time to develop. So you're not going to be asked about current affairs because they wouldn't have been able to write the questions for that. Metaphysics, thermodynamics, and other rather specialized subjects obviously won't come up. And as somebody, Nancy said, and others of you said, they also won't ask you about politics or religion because those are fairly personal subjects and you wouldn't expect somebody to ask you about them in a sort of general everyday conversation normally. So moving on to day 2 of the program, in this day or section, if you like, because you might be doing resources that you can use for building your vocabulary for Speaking Part 1. You are helped to understand how long your answers need to be in Part 1, and you have a chance to practice answering Part 1 questions and analysing how you could do better. So we're going to think briefly about what is a good Part 1 answer. And the question is, where are you from? So we're going to listen to 4 different people answering that question. And I'd like you to listen to them and decide which of them is a good, in quotes, answer for IELTS Part 1 listening. So, Layla, where are you from?
London.
Sarah, where are you from?
I'm from London.
Aidan, where are you from?
I'm originally from London, but I haven't lived there for a while now. I've lived in Paris for the last 12 years.
And Yasser, where are you from?
I'm from London. It's the capital of the UK. It has a population of 14.5 million people and good transport links.
Thank you. So these were the 4 answers that we listened to. I'm going to put up a poll question, and I'd like you to select which of those answers you think are appropriate answers to the question in IELTS Speaking Part 1, where are you from? So which of the answers there are good responses? Redmi's saying C and D, Fatima's saying the third one. Well, okay. We'll just give you another 10 seconds to complete the poll if you haven't already done so. Okay, and can we see the responses, please? All right, so most of you understood that if you shouldn't give a one-word answer or a very short answer like the first one and the second one. They're just a bit too short. You've got to try and answer the examiner's questions naturally, but just give a little bit more. Answer the question and then add a bit of more information up to a sentence or 2. So the best answer, and actually really the only answer that I'd recommend here, is C. So I'm just going to explain why D isn't a good answer, really, because it's not really natural. If somebody asks you where you're from, you tell them where you're from, but you don't normally start telling them about the population of the city or the infrastructure. It makes you seem a bit like a walking encyclopedia, but also there's a risk that the examiner might think that you've learned that off by heart. And so that's not good, because you shouldn't be trying to memorize answers for IELTS Speaking Part 1. So the most appropriate answer there is, and perhaps the only appropriate answer in the context of IELTS Speaking Part 1, is C. And other things that you will look at and do on day 2 is you'll be taken to an area on the IELTS.org website where there are lots more speaking part 1 questions that you can use to practice answering these questions. So moving on to day 3 of the program. On day 3, you practice part 2 doing a part 2, then you record yourself and compare how you did, and you watch a test taker answer part 2. And this is a good way to improve your speaking, even if you're working alone. Obviously, ideally, you'd have somebody to speak to, but if you don't, you can still improve your speaking. So you play a clip of something, then record yourself saying the same thing, compare your recording with the other one, notice the differences, and ask yourself if there is anything you can improve. So we're going to look now in a little bit more detail at part 2 of IELTS speaking test. So please tell me in the chat what you already know about the second part of the IELTS speaking test. What do you have to do? That kind of thing. So Susanna's saying you have a cue card. That's right. Sarah's saying it's the long turn. That's right. Arushi's saying it's a short talk for 2 minutes. That's correct. You have to speak on the topic, as somebody said. Yep. So in part 2, you're given a card with a topic on it, and you have to talk about that topic. You have 1 minute to prepare before you speak, and you have to speak for up to 2 minutes. The examiner will then ask you 1 or 2 short questions on the same topic at the end, just to round it off. So how long do you have to prepare in part 2? And Umido, we're going to answer your question in a minute. So my question to you, thank you, Susanna and Levgen, yes, and Nasrin. So you have 1 minute to prepare. Now I'm going to put up another couple of questions, questions 1 and 2, and I want you to tell me in the chat box if the answer is yes or no to these questions. So question 1, can I see the clock when I'm doing the IELTS speaking test? Is it yes or no? And do I have a paper and pencil? Okay, so it's, yeah. So can you see the clock? No, you can't. The examiner can see the clock, and it's the examiner's job to keep control of the timing. So don't worry about it. They'll tell you when the time's up, and you are provided with a paper and a pencil to make notes. So 2 more questions. Number 3, can I choose the topic? Can I look at my number 4? Can I look at my notes while speaking? So can you choose the topic? No, as Areli and Britesh are saying. And can you look at your notes? Yes, you can. So another 2 questions for you. Question 5, is part 2 a discussion? And question 6, can I keep the card while I'm speaking? So Rifata said, is part 2 a discussion? No, it isn't. No, you're right. But yes, you can keep the card while you're speaking, and it's quite useful because it can help you to remember everything that you need to talk about. 2 more questions for you. Number 7, people sometimes ask, are my notes assessed? And the answer to that, well done, Ishan, is no. And question 8, do I need to take my passport or ID to the speaking test? Mohammed saying maybe yes, Florence is saying yes, and you are completely right. When you register for the IELTS test, you have to submit a passport or ID document to register, and you need to have that document, whether it's your passport or your ID card, with you for the speaking test as for the other papers. And I've got one more question for you, which doesn't have a number because it's not a yes/no question. So, can I write notes in my own language? Can you, if you want to, but would you? So, obviously you can do whatever you like, and you can write your notes in any language, in any form, because they're not assessed. But really, when you've only got 1 minute, it's probably better to be trying to think of words and expressions that you want to use when you start speaking. And I think it's more helpful to write those notes in English so your mind stays in English, you're thinking in English. That would be the ideal. So for questions 1, 3, 5, and 7, the answer is no. For 2, 4, 6, and 8, the answer is yes. And for the last one, you can, but we wouldn't recommend it. Yes, exactly, Ariel. It's preferable to write in English. That's my view as well. So we're now going to listen to a part 2 answer, and I'd like you first just to look at the instructions. Just read that. That's the kind of card that you would get in IELTS Speaking Part 2. And can you tell me what the topic is that this person is being asked to speak about? And Ibnat, the answers to 2, 4, 6, and 8 were yes. So tell me in the chat box, well done, Nancy. And Blessing, yep, it's about a possession, an important possession. So while we listen to this, we're going to listen to a model, but while you listen, I want you to listen and try to answer these questions. So what is it? How did she get it? What does she do with it? And why is it important to her? And we'll check those at the end. So, Sarah, I'd like you to start speaking now, please.
Right. The important possession, well, possession I'm going to talk about is gold earrings, a pair of gold earrings. Actually, I'm wearing them right at this minute. And they're very important to me because I sort of got them through my grandmother, through my nan. But it's a bit of a story because it was coming up to my nan's 90th birthday, and we had no idea what to buy her. So my brothers and I got together and we thought about it, couldn't come up with any good ideas. And so in the end, I had this sort of a very careful conversation with my nan, said, oh, you're 90 years old nearly. Is there anything that you wished you'd done that you haven't done in your life so far? And she completely astonished me by saying she'd never had her ears pierced. So it suddenly all clicked in my head. And so I booked her an appointment to have her ears pierced. And my brothers and I, we bought these really, really nice gold earrings. And I went down to the place with her and got her ears done. And she had little studs in at that time. And then actually on her 90th birthday, we presented her with these gold earrings. And she was astonished. I mean, I was astonished that she wanted to have her ears pierced, but she was absolutely astonished that, you know, I picked up on and we'd organised all this and bought her these beautiful earrings. And then sadly, when she died, mind you, she was 96 when she died. So she left me these gold earrings. And so I've had them ever since. And what do I do with them? Well, I wear them. I wear them all the time, apart from when I'm sleeping or when I'm having a shower. So that's, that's probably one of my most important possessions. Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah. So she wears them all the time, Redmi. Yes, she does. So, just put your answers to the questions in the chat box if you want to. Okay, well done, Uma. Okay, well done, Mizuki. So just check your answers now. So Sarah told us about a pair of gold earrings that she got from her grandmother. She wears them all the time, and they're important to her because they remind her of her grandmother. So that's the sort of thing that you'll be doing on day 3 of the IELTS Speaking Study Skills program. And now I'm just going to tell you a little bit about day 4. So in day 4, you're going to practice answering part 3 questions. You're going to be directed to the Learn English website to work on past tense forms. And this is important because it is likely that in part 3, you will be asked to compare the past and the present. And if it gives you a chance to show the examiner that you can accurately use a range of past tense forms. Because IELTS is a test of your language, but you've also got to show the examiner how good you are. Practicing the questions will make you feel more confident. And when you watch the videos, notice what the test takers do well. Maybe note down any unfamiliar words or expressions. If they start talking about altos and sopranos, if you don't know what those are, write them down, look them up. And any nice turns of phrase that they use. So, now, thinking about IELTS Speaking Part 3, tell me in the chat box what you already know about it. What happens? How long is it? What are you supposed to do? So Ramnik saying questions connected to the topic that you've talked about in Part 2. Yes, that's right. Abu Yassin, good point. It's about opinions. Yes, Sanet, it is difficult. And Sarah, it is difficult, but it's meant to be the chance for you to show just how good your English is. So let's have a look. So in part 3, you're asked more questions related to the topic that you've talked about in part 2, so possession in this instance. And in part 3, you're given the opportunity to discuss more abstract ideas and issues, and it lasts between 4 and 5 minutes. So that's a little bit of information about part 3, but now I've got some questions for you. Are these statements about IELTS Speaking Part 3, are they true or false? So number 1, in part 3, you might be asked to speculate about the future. What do you think? Put your answers in the chat box, please. True, Sarah, yes. Well done. And Farouk and, so it's true. Well done, Fabio. So next one. In part 3, you talk about yourself. Is that true or false? Do you talk about yourself? Anastasia, well done. It's false. No, you're supposed to talk more generally. You're supposed to talk more abstractly. So it stops being personally about you when you get to part 3, and you've got to talk about the world in general. Number 3 there, in part 3, you can take notes. Mayoa, that's right. No, you can't. It's in part 2 that you take notes. Part 3, you can't take any notes, and you don't have a paper and pencil anymore. And the last one, in part 3, you might be asked to compare past and present. Is that true? I hope you've been listening to me, because I've already told you the answer to that one. Right, thank you, Abu Yassin. Yes, it's true. So also on this day, so this is the study plan takes you to a specific part of the Learn English site. So this is completely free, in case you were wondering. And it takes you to an exercise that will help you to make sure that you are accurate in your use of different past forms like used to, would, the past simple, etc. So this exercise helps you to accurately use a variety of forms to talk about the past. So then you demonstrate what they're looking for in IELTS, which is a range of simple and complex forms. And this will help you to get a better score in the grammatical range and accuracy criteria. And of course, with the study plan takes you to one exercise on the Learn English site, but there's a wealth of material there to help you with your grammar, your vocabulary, and your skills. So, you know, don't just do one exercise. Have a look at some of the exercises that are there and maybe put some into your own study plan for yourself. And it's free, so you can use it anytime you like. So, and now we're going to listen to some people answering some part 3 type questions. So in part 2, we talked about, or Sarah talked about, a possession. So the part 3 questions are related to that. So as you listen to these questions, I'd like you to just notice if the speakers do they talk in abstract general terms, and do they give reasons and or examples? So, Sarah, how do we decide the value of a product?
Oh gosh, that's really difficult. Well, I suppose it depends. It can be, I think, on an individual level, that how much you personally value something. You know, for example, if you've got an auction and there's a painting that's, say, priced at $10,000 or whatever, if there are two people who want it and somebody says 11,000, the other person says 12,000, the value of that painting will go up. So, but that's because of the individuals themselves who want it.
Thank you, Sarah. Aidan, does modern society appreciate possessions?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. But this is not surprising considering the never-ending stream of advertisements we're bombarded with 24/7. This makes consumerism, possessions and acquiring them a big deal. And I think this concerns most people wherever they live.
Have things changed since your parents' time, Aidan?
Yeah, I would say so, quite a lot. They have changed. In their day, there seemed to be less to buy in terms of variety, and it was also harder to go out and buy things. For example, they had to travel to shops, and shops often closed at 5:30 in the evening. Now, I can shop from my sofa using my computer.
Thank you, Aidan. And Yasser, give our webinar audience an idea of somebody else answering the type of questions. So again, you should be listening out, everybody, for how they answer the questions. These are just samples. So Yasser, how does a consumerist society impact the way we live?
I think it definitely has a massive impact on the way we live. The obsession with acquiring new things, new gadgets, I think has led to many people maybe overworking. Also, it has led to, for instance, inequality in terms of maybe people who can afford something like an iPhone and people who cannot.
And how do you think this might impact our life in the future, Yasser?
I think it could definitely, if we keep going down this path, it will continue to have a negative impact. For example, another thing might be the effect on the environment, the concept of e-waste. The fact that we change our phones so regularly has led to a problem with how to dispose of the old ones.
Thank you, Yasser. So we listened to Sarah, Aidan and Yasser answering sample part 3 speaking questions. Did they talk in abstract general terms? And did they give reasons and or examples? Mary Joyce says yes. Yes, they did. And that's how you should be aiming to answer those part 3 questions. So moving on, the last day of the self-study program, you practice a full IELTS speaking test, you evaluate your own performance, you review the work you've done on the program, and you watch a full IELTS test. So that's sort of rounds off the program nicely. I'm now going to share with you some top tips for speaking before trying to answer a couple of your questions before the end of the webinar. So obviously, if you want to improve your speaking, try to practice speaking in English as much as you can. If you've got somebody you can speak with, perfect. If you haven't, don't worry, don't be shy. Talk to yourself aloud in English. Get your mouth around the sound of the words, make yourself feel more confident. Obviously, listening to lots of spoken English, whether chat shows or anything, you know, TED Talks, whatever you want to listen to which has spoken English, choose something that interests you, but make sure that you listen to lots of it. With regard to the test, remember in part 1, you should try to answer the questions with 2 or 3 sentences, but don't be a walking encyclopedia. Record yourself doing speaking tasks and then listen back and evaluate how you're doing. Is there something that you can do better? Listen and watch the IELTS speaking videos and pick out good language that you want to use yourself. And particularly pick out the things that the candidates do well that you think you could use in your own speaking. So a summary of what we've looked at in this webinar, we've thought about how we can organize ourselves to study independently. We've shared our tips for successful self-study. We've looked briefly at the 3 parts of the IELTS speaking test about what makes a good part 1 answer, listen to a model part 2 answer, and listen to people answering part 3 type questions. And I've tried to give you a taste of what's in the self-study program to encourage you to keep working on your own towards your IELTS test. And remember, although the study guides are organized into days, it doesn't mean that you have to do it all in 5 days. They are flexible. You can do 1 part a day or 1 part a week. You need to find something that works for you. Practice a little but often, and above all, be kind to yourself. So we have a few minutes left. So I'm going to go across to the question and answer and try to answer some of your questions. So, Sarah, you're saying that you think part 2 is going to be very hard for you. Sarah, it's something, you know, build it up slowly. Practice talking about IELTS part 2 type topics for 1 minute, first of all, and then do a few and then build up and just do a lot of practice. The examples for the speaking part, you've got links in, Luciana, you've got links in the self-study program, and you can obviously find them on the Take IELTS and IELTS.org website. Ramnik's asking, can you download the video recordings? Ramnik, I'd be surprised, but you can access them and watch them. So you probably can't download them, but I don't think that you should need to download them. Sorry, so Jamil's asking, is there a computer-based speaking exam? Not really, Jamil, no, it's still face-to-face with an examiner. It's possible that there might be this option for people in very remote areas, perhaps, who couldn't get into the town for tests. That might be something that we'll see in the future, but at the moment, no, we don't. Okay, Tommy was asking, talking in general abstract form, you don't really understand it. So if I'm talking personally, I will talk, let's say the topic is older people. So if I'm talking personally, I'll talk about my parents or my grandparents. But if I'm talking generally, or I will talk about older people. So I don't make it personal to me and my family and my experience. I say, well, generally, well, here in France, older people have a very good lifestyle because they usually have good pensions and there's a very good medical service. I don't say my grandma has a good lifestyle. I talk about people in general. That's what I mean. I hope that helps you to understand what we mean. Just trying to find another question. Afroza, how can you register again? Well, you register for the test itself on the Take IELTS website, and you also can register for our webinars on our Take IELTS website. Elizabeth's asking, is it necessary to give examples in every part during answering the questions? Yes, I would say, well, particularly in part 3, you're going to need to give examples. You need to justify what you say. And you do that through giving either reasons or examples. In part 1, it's often an example is an easy way to extend your answer, because remember, you want to say 2 or 3 sentences if you can. Salim's asking how you can improve frequent pauses in your speaking. Salim, you need to practice, and you need to record yourself, listen to yourself, and try to do better. It takes time. Be kind to yourself. Mohammed's asking about the next webinar. So we have a speaking webinar on Tuesday next week. So you can register for that on our website. Sorry, just looking for another question. So Abdul Kader is saying that you're a student and you're preparing for AS levels. Should you do IELTS at the same time? Abdul Kader, unless you need to do them at the same time, no, I would concentrate on your AS levels and do IELTS once you've got those out the way. Like you said, you know, there could be some crossover between them, which might not be helpful. Anu, I'm going to give you the July schedule in the next slide. I'm just going to try to answer 1 or 2 more questions. So Mohammed's Hashim Khan is saying, can you ask the meaning of possession to the examiner in part 2? Yes, if you don't understand the word that the part 2 is about, if you don't understand the topic, yes, do ask the examiner if they could clarify, or if you think you know and you're not sure, say, am I right when I say possession, you mean an object that I have, or something like that. For the next writing webinar, we will be able to tell you that when I put the schedule up. And we've just got a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to leave Q&A now, and I'm going to just tell you about our our webinars for July. So we've got an academic writing task 1 webinar on Thursday the 2nd. We'll be running webinars on Thursdays only in July. The next week it's writing task 2. Then we're looking at how to develop vocabulary for IELTS, and on Thursday the 23rd of July it'll be about developing your reading skills for IELTS, and we will be adding another topic for the end of July. So now I'm just going to tell you about some resources, but do be aware these are all new webinars. So if you've been to webinars before with us, this is a different webinar. It's not the same one repeated. So I'm just going to move across to the resources. But if you found something helpful or useful, or you've liked anything about this webinar, please do give us some feedback in the chat box. Tell us what you liked, tell us what was useful. So in terms of resources for IELTS, your first port of call should be takeielts.org, where you'll find lots of support materials, free practice tests. We also have the Take IELTS official Facebook page, and I would recommend that you join that if you haven't already. On that page, we also have regular sessions with IELTS experts. So if you had a question today and we didn't manage to answer it, you can join the Facebook page and you can ask an IELTS expert on the Facebook page and they'll give you an answer to your question. There's also on that site, you can do a free computer delivered familiarization test. And if you're thinking about doing computer delivered IELTS, we would strongly recommend that you do a familiarization test so that you understand how the system works. Also from Take IELTS, you can get access to Road to IELTS, where again, there are more practice tests and activities and hints and tips for different types of questions in IELTS. The British Council has a free 3-week online preparation course for IELTS. That's a MOOC, a massive open online course, which is offered on FutureLearn. Again, it's completely free. Please, you know, if you've got 3 weeks before you need to take IELTS, do have a look at that. See if you want to sign up for that. That'll make you, maybe even make it part of your study plan. They run on a cycle, so they repeat. Don't forget our useful IELTS apps, the IELTS Prep app and the IELTS Word Power app and Word Ready, which will help you to build your vocabulary for IELTS. And of course, there's always the official books and study guides, which you can get from Amazon or from the IELTS.org website. So that's really it from me for today. I'd just like to thank you all very much for being here and for participating so actively, and I hope that something has been useful for you. And take care of yourselves, be kind to yourselves, stay safe, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks, bye-bye.